Also, I like to discuss about drawing and other things. So please subscribe here on YouTube. Click like if you do like this video and give comments. I have a Patreon which I'm starting, and I would love to have more Patreon supporters. Help me get better equipment, cameras, synthesizers, all that. It does get expensive. These things are not self-upgrading, as we talked about earlier, so I could use your help with that. Anyway, VJ Franz K, drawing, discussing about dreams. Instead of worrying about getting a perfect gradient, I will just put a bunch more lines on here, sort of giving it a stripe gradient. Then I'll give him flying red hair. Sort of going off in every direction as he's flying through the air. And that was me, kind of, in my dream. And so I thought it would be a good thing to draw here. Let's see, what more do I need here? These glasses need another thing there. I'll put the green on chameleon mode, get it ready for another round. And color him in here. Clean off my brush tip to the side on the paper. I do wish I could speed up the process of the I do wish I could speed up the process of the chameleon markers, but it doesn't really work that way. Right. So put down another row of light blue, and then it starts to fade into more darkness each line that I make. So going along here. Then while I have this out here, I'm going to make some swirly cloud-like lines, just to show that he is in the sky, or imply the sky, shall we say. It's fun to just draw spirals. Move this paper up a bit. Spirals They are mathematical. They appear in physics. You know, the water pouring down into the sink, or you spin a spoon in your coffee or tea, and they have the milk. My friend is a barista, and she makes the patterns on the surface of the coffee, and then adds the milk and cinnamon sort of patterns. All using the natural properties of liquid and the materials. But all of these beautiful shapes of nature, they seem totally natural, and yet mathematics is able to describe a lot of natural shapes. And, you know, the laws of nature are what create those shapes, or the roundness of a flower, the way the seeds are in a sunflower, or the way that a fern leaf will, the fern, it rolls up, or it starts rolled up and then it unrolls as it grows. But it ends up looking like a fractal. Or, since fractals weren't discovered until, you know, millions and millions of years after the plants did that, we'll just say fractals look like plants. That's another thing I would like to get into on YouTube, is doing science discussion videos, because there is so much interesting science to discuss. And I don't know, I think a lot of times on YouTube people get distracted with very shallow things that people take perhaps more seriously than they need to, and they forget a lot of really big things that do matter, like the universe and science and outer space. We want to get to outer space and be able to live there, go beyond just the limits of our planet. Our planet is a wonderful place to live, but who knows what sort of paradise we could make on other planets if we can get there. And as you'll see on Star Trek or other shows about science fiction, it would be a lot better if the human race would work together and cooperate instead of fighting wars, and if we could use more renewable power sources like solar power or wind power or the ocean, other things that don't have these limitations. With, you know, the solar power or wind or the water, anyone in the world would be able to generate their own power. They wouldn't need to import oil, or they wouldn't need to use nuclear power with all of the environmental dangers of it. They wouldn't need to so that would be much, much better for our world if we could use renewable energy sources. And the more people understand science, the value of science, there are ways that you can put it into practice and make life better once you are educated and you understand science, you will also choose leaders who value this stuff. You know that they will steer you right. They will help the planet for future generations, but you can see the environment change within one lifetime. You don't have to wait until the future, though things will be much more evident in the future if all of our animals and plants become extinct and the air becomes so toxic that no one can breathe it. That would be a true tragedy. See, drawing in blue jeans here. I guess the blue and the green blend a bit together. Here's a guy, got a question mark. I like question marks. I like question marks because I like to question. Just put out good questions to ask other people, but also ask yourself. And it's good to know and understand things and be confident about what you know, but just because you think you know everything, well, there is no way to know everything. No way with our limited human minds that we could. But if you compare, a caveman with a modern human, we are so much more educated, and yes, our brains are getting more complicated to deal with all of the complications in thought. Evolution does happen, and those with more complicated brains will be rewarded with better circumstances. So, yes, denying evolution seems to be a kind of ridiculous and backward activity. It's disappointing when such an amazing theory is out there, and yet people don't want to believe it because they think it counteracts the Bible or some other thing. But you can see evolution working right in front of you. If you have two dogs or plants or whatever, you breed them together, and you'll notice that the offspring has some features of one parent and some features of another. It's so obvious that it is working. And over time, with all of the changes of, the different way that the genes come together, and also occasional mutations. Mutations don't necessarily work like you see on the X-Men, where somebody just out of the blue has amazing powers, but once in a while something really unusual or useful will come up, and then that will be passed on to future generations. So that's evolution happening right there. And saying that apes and monkeys, chimpanzees, bonobos, gorillas, to say these creatures aren't related to us seems pretty ridiculous, because you watch them, they look a lot like us, they have faces like ours, they have hands, and they live in families. They act like us. it is pretty obvious that we are all related, and it makes sense that from smaller apes, these larger apes, and then us, evolved from, instead of hanging from the trees, we got used to walking on the ground and standing upright. And then we get the hands, the all-important hands and the opposable thumb here, which allows us to draw pictures and write, build technology, and really become maybe the first species on Earth to be able to have control over evolution and to choose to survive, to really be able to influence our survival and also the survival and changing of other species. Most obviously, dogs are common domesticated pet, and cows, cats, all of these creatures that we took evolution into our own hands and made them take on characteristics that we thought would help us. And yeah, that could be considered a bit on the selfish side, considering that we did it with this motivation. But at the same time, it becomes symbiosis, which means living together, and thus the family pet or working animals, all of these things. Wow. This has become a really rambling discussion, and that's fine. I like to ramble. I hope you like to ramble along. Wonder what else this picture needs. Maybe a bird. Maybe a bird perched on this end here. Left-handedness is an example of an unusual trait, and I believe it is a recessive gene. It is less common to be passed on. But if your parents are left-handed, the more left-handers in your family, the more likely you will be left-handed. So and there were left-handed people in my family, so it's not that big of a surprise that I would be. They say that left-handers, we're kind of different, and that our brain